Tucked along the sun-drenched cliffs of the French Riviera, the tiny Principality of Monaco has always punched far above its size when it comes to royal fascination. Barely 2 square kilometers in total, this glittering city-state has captivated the world for decades with its casinos, its Grand Prix, and its storied ruling family, the House of Grimaldi. In 2026, the spotlight is falling once again on the family's youngest generation. Hereditary Prince Jacques and his twin sister, Princess Gabriella, are no longer toddlers peeking out from behind their parents. They are growing into their public roles, and the world is taking notice. This is the story of 2 children born 2 minutes apart who occupy very different places in the line of succession, yet who have grown up side by side as the most photographed young royals in Europe's smallest sovereign state. On December 10, 2014, Princess Grace Hospital Center in Monaco became the site of one of the most anticipated royal births of the decade. Princess Charlene, wife of Sovereign Prince Albert II, gave birth to twins. Gabriella arrived first, at 5:04 in the afternoon. Her brother Jacques followed 2 minutes later. In most families, being born first would make a child the eldest. In Monaco, where succession has traditionally passed to the firstborn son, that 2-minute gap meant everything for how their futures would unfold. Jacques instantly became hereditary Prince of Monaco, the direct heir to his father's throne. Gabriella, despite technically being the elder twin, was placed second in the line of succession and given the title Countess of Carlades, an old title tied to lands the Grimaldi family has held in France for generations. Monaco did not let the moment pass quietly. Cannons at Fort Antoine fired a salute of 21 shots for each child, 42 in total, echoing across the harbor and up into the hillside streets. Church bells rang throughout the city. For a nation whose entire modern identity is wrapped up in its ruling family, the birth of twins, and especially the birth of a male heir, was read as a guarantee that the 7-century-old Grimaldi dynasty would carry on. Before Jacques and Gabriella arrived, there had been genuine uncertainty about who would eventually inherit the throne, since Albert's 2 adult children from earlier relationships were not eligible under Monaco's rules of succession. The twins settled that question decisively. A few weeks later, in January 2015, Albert and Charlene carried their newborns onto the balcony of the Prince's Palace to present them to a crowd gathered in the square below, continuing a tradition observed by European royal houses for centuries. It was a brief, quiet moment that nonetheless reassured a nation watching closely. Over the past decade, Jacques and Gabriella have grown from bundled infants on a palace balcony into recognizable young royals with their own personalities and their own place in Monaco's public life. Rather than being paraded constantly before cameras, the twins have been introduced to public duties gradually, appearing at a handful of key events each year, most notably Monaco's National Day on November 19, when the entire royal family gathers on the palace balcony to greet the crowds after the traditional Te Deum service at Monaco Cathedral. 2025 turned out to be a particularly significant year for the twins, and it set the stage for what the public is now watching unfold in 2026. In the spring of that year, Jacques and Gabriella received their first Holy Communion at the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception, the same cathedral where their grandparents, Grace Kelly and Rainier III, are laid to rest. For a family that has long positioned Catholic faith as central to Monaco's national identity, the ceremony carried weight well beyond a typical childhood milestone. It tied the twins, quite literally, to the same stones and the same altar that connect them to generations of Grimaldi rulers before them. Just a few months later, in June 2025, the twins took part in something they had never done before, a state visit. French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte arrived in Monaco to reinforce ties between France and the Principality, and for the first time, Jacques and Gabriella were brought into the formal welcoming party. Gabriella personally presented flowers to the First Lady, a small gesture that nonetheless marked a real shift in how the palace is choosing to involve its youngest members in matters of state. It was no longer just balconies and photo calls. The twins were beginning to take part, in a limited and carefully managed way, in the actual business of representing Monaco. Summer brought more milestones. In July 2025, the family celebrated the 20th anniversary of Albert II's accession to the throne with a lavish evening that included ice sculptures and a towering cake, and the twins, by then 10 years old, stood beside their parents as part of the celebration, a visual reminder of just how far the Grimaldi succession story had come in 2 decades. Then, in December 2025, Jacques and Gabriella turned 11. The Prince's Palace marked the occasion with a new set of official portraits, taken by Vanessa von Zitzowitz, a German-born photographer who has lived in Monaco for 3 decades and has become something of the unofficial court photographer for the Grimaldi family. The images, shot in one of the palace's formal white and gold salons, showed a noticeably grown-up pair, Jacques in an ivory knit sweater, Gabriella in a sequin dress, both looking considerably less like the small children who once toddled onto balconies and more like young people beginning to understand what it means to be watched by an entire country. Now, moving through 2026, the twins are entering what royal watchers describe as a new phase, one where age-appropriate public duties start to feel less like occasional appearances and more like an ongoing rhythm of national life. There is something quietly poignant about Gabriella's position within her own family.
She was born first.
By nearly any other logic, that would make her the natural heir. But Monaco's succession rules have historically prioritized male heirs, and so it is her brother, born 2 minutes later, who will one day become sovereign. This has never seemed to diminish Gabriella's presence, however. If anything, those who follow the Monégasque royal family closely describe her as the more outwardly expressive of the two siblings. Prince Albert himself has spoken about his daughter's spirited, energetic personality, often contrasting it with his son's quieter nature. At official events, Gabriella tends to be the one caught mid-laugh or mid-wave by photographers, while Jacques is more likely to be composed and watchful. Her role within the monarchy, while not one that leads to the throne, is far from symbolic window dressing. Throughout Monaco's history, women in the Grimaldi family have taken on meaningful responsibilities, from supporting cultural institutions to representing the principality abroad. As Gabriella grows older, many expect her path to resemble that of other female royals across Europe: patronage of charitable causes, involvement in cultural preservation, and a steadily increasing public profile that operates alongside, rather than beneath, her brother's role as heir. Her Countess of Charlene's title connects her to a piece of Monaco's history in southern France, a reminder that even without the throne, she carries forward part of the family's landed legacy. And as the twins' 2025 state visit with the Macrons demonstrated, Gabriella is already being trusted with small but visible diplomatic gestures, the kind of responsibilities that tend to expand steadily as a royal child gets older. If Gabriella is the more visibly animated of the pair, Jacques has built a reputation as the calmer, more measured twin, the one who watches before he acts. Those who observe Monaco's royal family closely have long noted this contrast between the siblings, though they are equally careful to point out that Jacques has grown noticeably more at ease in public over the past couple of years. Where he was once shy and reserved on the palace balcony, recent appearances have shown him smiling more freely, waving to crowds, and standing with visibly greater confidence beside his father. That confidence matters, because Jacques carries a weight his sister does not. As hereditary prince and holder of the title Marquis de Beau, a designation traditionally given to Monaco's heir apparent and tied to a medieval town in southern France, Jacques is, in effect, a sovereign in training. Every appearance at National Day, every state visit, every ceremonial occasion is, in some sense, a small rehearsal for a role he will eventually inherit in full. His education is being shaped with that future firmly in mind. Like heirs to other European thrones, Jacques is expected to be given a broad education spanning history, languages, international relations, and environmental policy, an area where his father has built much of his own public profile through decades of advocacy work. Albert II's environmental initiatives, in particular, are widely expected to influence how Jacques approaches his own future responsibilities, since sustainability and ocean conservation have become defining themes of the current sovereign's reign. For now, Jacques' public duties remain limited and closely managed by his parents, who have tried to give both children as much of an ordinary childhood as their position allows. But each year brings a slightly larger role, more events, more visibility, and a gradually increasing sense that the country is watching its future ruler take shape in real time. Despite their different futures, the most consistent thread running through the twins' public life is how closely tied they remain to one another. Whether at National Day, at their first Holy Communion, in the 2025 state visit, or in their 11th birthday portraits, Jacques and Gabriella are rarely photographed apart. Palace imagery consistently shows the two standing shoulder to shoulder, often with Jacques' arm around his sister, a small but telling detail that suggests a closeness that has little to do with titles or succession. That bond is likely to matter a great deal in the years ahead. European monarchies have increasingly leaned into showing not just heirs but entire sibling groups as a unified public face of the family, and Monaco appears to be following that pattern. Where Gabriella cannot inherit the throne, she can still serve as a visible, active partner to her brother's reign, much as siblings of monarchs elsewhere in Europe have done. Where Jacques will eventually carry the formal weight of sovereignty, he does so with a twin sister who has been beside him, quite literally, since before either of them could walk. As 2026 continues, expect the pattern established over the last 2 years to keep building. National Day in November will almost certainly bring the twins back to the palace balcony, now visibly older and more composed than in years past. Religious and cultural traditions, from the Saint Devote ceremony each January to the annual Monaco picnic, will likely continue to feature both children as they edge closer to adolescence. And as diplomatic visits like the one with the Macrons become less of a novelty and more of a recurring role, the twins are likely to be given incrementally larger responsibilities befitting their status. Neither Jacques nor Gabriella has reached the age where they take on formal duties independently, and Monaco's palace has, by most accounts, tried to shield much of their day-to-day life, their schooling, their friendships, their ordinary childhood moments, from public view. But the public moments that do occur, the birthday portraits, the balcony appearances, the state visits, tell a fairly consistent story. Two children who were born 2 minutes apart, who occupy very different positions in one of Europe's oldest ruling houses, and who are together, becoming the recognizable face of Monaco's next generation. Whatever else changes in the years ahead, that much seems certain. The Grimaldi dynasty, which has weathered war, scandal and centuries of political upheaval since the 13th century, now has its future resting, quite visibly, on the shoulders of two 11-year-olds who grew up mostly out of the spotlight and are only now beginning to step fully into it. What do you think about how Monaco's royal family is preparing Prince Jacques and Princess Gabriella for their very different futures? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this look at Monaco's youngest royals, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing for more coverage of Europe's royal families.